All right, on this door, we've been called out to this business. What they want to do is they want to put this Schlage FE-575 digital lock on this particular door to where they open it with a keypad on the outside and has a key override. But first of all, we need to take off what is actually on here. The lock that's on here is a heavy-duty Falcon F series. Probably not the heaviest one Falcon has, but it's a pretty good lock. And I want to show you how to remove the rows as we take this off, and I'll explain some details to you here as we go along. First of all, there's a retainer clip right in here from the inside of the door. You push in on that retainer clip and actually just remove the handle, which comes off like that. By the way, we are in a commercial business, and downstairs they have a daycare, so if you hear any kids running through the hall screaming top of their lungs, that's what you're hearing. All right, so anyways, the next thing we do is we want to remove this rose. Now, let me show you the side of this lock, because I've seen this a lot on businesses where the guy putting the lock in didn't know what he was doing. He just took the rose on here like this and just popped it on there and said we're good to go. Here's the problem doing that. First of all, when they slam the door, the rose is going to go flying off and you're going to be back out fixing it. But on the side of here, you see this little slot here? You got a slot here, and you've got one over on this side, and then you've got two notches. Well, on this rose, if you look at the side, there's one there and one on the other side. It goes in like this, and then it clicks once and it clicks twice. And that's actually what will keep that rose from actually coming off the door. So first thing we do, we take the lever handle off by pushing in, as you see right here, this little retainer clip. And then we're going to take these two screws off. Now, let me make a comment. If this particular lock was a Schlage heavy-duty lock, because you're going to run into these, the way you can tell a Schlage heavy-duty lock is when you get it this far down, you're going to see some threads right around this part of the lock. And there's going to be like a nut that has been screwed on there that has little slots cut in it. Well, when you buy a Schlage heavy-duty lever set, it comes with a deal about like that. It looks like a deep socket is what it looks like. When you get those, keep them, because I have one that I keep in my toolbox if this were to be a Schlage heavy-duty lever set. The way you would get this off is you can undo these screws, but to get the rest of the lock off, let me go ahead and take this off first, and then I'll explain it further. So we start by taking these two screws loose. This lock is actually held on with 4 screws. There's a post on the rose on the outside that comes through that this actually screws into. But on a Schlage heavy-duty lock, you're going to get it down, you're going to see this cap that's screwed on here. If you have that tool, slip it on here into those grooves and then just unscrew it, as opposed to just having 2 screws like this one does. I've done them before and didn't have that particular tool. And what I had to do was just take a flathead screwdriver and just kind of knock it around until I got it loose. And it's a lot better if you have that tool. But it's just a rose removal tool for a heavy-duty Schlage lever lock. And it can be challenged if nobody's ever told you about them. And you try, when you pull stuff like this off, always keep it on the floor in the same place, because I have hunted around for days for one little screw that I kicked across the room just by accident. So I try to keep all of my parts, when I pull a lock off, in one place on the floor so I can get to them. Now, a lot of times this inner rose, this part here, it's going to be really tight on here because they pulled it tight by these screws. And so you don't want to bend this. You just kind of want to work your way around on it. And it will usually come off pretty easy. And then just try to work it loose to where you don't bend it. Bending it is what you do not want to do, because you're probably going to end up installing it somewhere else later, right? So if you bend it, you kind of mess yourself up. All right, okay, so we're going to take this off of here. Now, You want to be careful on these heavy-duty locks when you take them out that you don't just accidentally drop this, because if they got Spanish tile, you're going to be retiling their floor for them. And we don't want to be tile guys, we want to be locksmiths. So if the lock's heavy, be careful that you don't drop it. And I know that sounds dumb, but I've known guys that have had to replace Spanish tile in a home that had heavy-duty locks that they dropped it on the floor and it cracked the tile. So we're going to take this loose. And one real quick thing I'm going to show you here on this lock before we get to the Schlage is I want to show you how this latch actually plugs into this lock. I'm not going to go into any great detail because I'm going to do a tabletop actually on this particular lock later on. But it has two fingers right here that are fixed. The inner part that pulls the bolt back are these fingers right in here. And it hooks right inside there. And if you'll look at this lock real careful, you can see this latch actually goes in here just like that. The fingers are going around the outside of this, and these prongs are actually catching this inner part of this lock to where when the lock is opened, that's actually what does it. And the spring for this latch doesn't have much spring to it. The spring is really in the handle. So let's go ahead and we're going to look at the Schlage lock and take a look at it, how to program it, and these kind of things, and then we're going to stick it on this door, and the next one you'll be able to do and make some good money. All right, what we got here is the Schlage FE-575. Now this particular lock is, I guess, what you call a classroom or a storeroom function, which means they want this door to always remain locked. Now let's take a look at what's in here. This lock also has a key override. Naturally, you've got your good old instructions. I encourage you guys, man, and I can only say this a million times, always read the instructions. Myself, after 40 plus years as a locksmith, I still will at least do myself a huge favor and browse through, hopefully not the Spanish side, the American side of your brochure. Let's look at what comes in the box. Of course, you've got your warranty card and you've got your instruction card. This here says keypad lock user guide. It tells you how to set your unit back to default and combinations should you mess up the combinations. There's also a page in here that actually shows you the code that they use. Like I told you, there's a daycare downstairs in this building that we're in. It shows you it's already preset with an A code and a B code. This lock will hold up to 19 different codes, and it also gives you a programming code, and we'll get into that here once we get the lock installed. But let's take a look at the lock and look at the parts that are in here. Of course, you've got your latch guard and things, but I want to show you a piece of this lock that will cost you an account. And listen very carefully to what I'm getting ready to say. This piece right here, let me explain to you what this piece is for. Some of you guys may already know. This right here, if I was going to install it in that door, I could drill a 1-inch hole or whatever it called for. I could take a screwdriver and stick it in here, pop this cap off here and stick this in here like this, and just take it and hammer it in the door. But I'm telling you, man, what's going to happen is this thing is going to work itself loose eventually, and the lock's going to become sloppy in it, and the guy that paid $310 for this to have you install it, it's going to cost you an account because he's going to think, man, what a sloppy job of installing it. Take the time to cut this out when you install it if you're installing it fresh on a new door, and we'll talk about that more when we get to the door. So let's go ahead now, and we're going to flip around here to the door, and we're actually going to install this lock. Okay, what we've got here is the latch that came out of the box. You'll notice on all of your commercial doors, the distance between the edge of the door and the center of the door on a commercial door is always 2 3/4. This particular lock came where it would be able to be used with the 2 3/4 or a 2 3/8. This particular door, like I say, is a 2 3/4. And I'm kind of doing this backwards from what I normally do to not get in the camera guy's way, but I think we can maybe get these screws put in here if we're able to do things ambidextrous. So we're going to put this in here, and then we're going to actually install the lever set, which is actually a digital lever set. Now, one thing about these screws, you want to kind of maybe leave these a little bit loose. This is just personally the way I do it. I leave them a little bit loose to where I can move this in and out to kind of help line up the latch if I happen to need to do that. But before we do that, let's take a look at actually the lock. There's two covers on this lock. One of them is where your battery goes, which is down here in the bottom. The other part is up here, which is where your cylinder is, and you're going to have to key this. Don't let this cylinder scare you, because it's the exact same cylinder that's in a Schlage knob lock. The only trick is getting it out of here, which is really still no trick. Remove this cap, sometimes easier said than done, and it just pops right off there. Now if you look on the inside of this, there's a screw right there. You simply remove that screw and this cylinder comes right out the back, and when you're holding it, it is exactly like what is in a regular Schlage knob lock. The only other difference in it is remember which way this cam is direction. It's not sitting in there like that, it's sitting in there like that. And that's the only thing I had to really remember whenever I rekeyed this. Now as far as how does this lock work, if you'll see this piece of plastic right here, if you push down on this, this outside or inside knob will, or the outside knob will turn and pull the latch back. But when this piece of plastic is in the up position, it won't. So when you put this plug in here, this cap, and flip this thing over, you'll see it turns. And what it does is it pulls this down, which pulls this part of the lock down and allows you to be able to open the lock by the lever on the outside with the handle. So let me go ahead and pop this back on here, which is really no big deal. It just pops right back in there, and I just got to make sure I got the cam going in the right direction. Now this tail piece, you don't want to put it in there like that. You don't want to put it in there like this. As a matter of fact, it will only let you put it in there in this angle right here. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to just slip this in the lock like that. And remember, I didn't tighten my latch down because I want to be able to have movement in here to make sure I can center this in the door. Now, when you put this piece on the back rows, you always want this pin right here to be towards the hinges, to where the handles will line up, and I'm going to show you how these handles, the lock is not handed. What that means, you don't have to buy a right-handed lock or a left-handed lock. You just reverse the levers on these, and the levers on both sides are exactly the same. But it's important that you have this pin pointing towards the hinges, because if you don't, your handles are not going to be setting in the lock properly. So let's go ahead, and we've got them setting in the right direction, and I'm going to take these two screws down here and start screwing it in. Now if you'll notice on this door, they had a heavy-duty lever set in here that had these two holes that you see showing here. There's nothing we can do about that. The only thing you could do probably, and I carry in my van putty to fill those if the customer requests it or whatever. This is an older warehouse type building. They could really care less. They just want it done. Or if you know they're going to be painting the property. Now I'm pushing back on this lock, keeping it pretty much to where it is what I believe to be center. And when you tighten these down, you want to tighten them down evenly, because if you don't, you will put the cam that goes through the center of this lock will be in a bind. And what'll happen, the way you'll know that you've done that, is you'll pull the lever down and the lever will stay down. It'll actually stay in the downward position, because it's actually in a bind like this as opposed to being completely straight. because you can't really go by these holes, because a lot of times when guys put these in, they don't really perfectly line the hole up, which kind of creates a problem. I'm going to put some pressure on this, and then I'm going to tighten the one on the bottom. And I'm also going to look on the outside of this lock, because this is actually pulling that lock up against the door. Now, let's take a look on the edge here. You see how it's pulled it flush? Actually pulled it flush up against the door. Now let's go ahead and check it and make sure that we're secure, which we are. Now we can tighten our latch down. This is just the way I do it. A lot of guys will go ahead and tighten the latch and hope for the best, but I don't like to do that because I like the lock to work just like butter. And it will if you don't cause the lock to be in a bind in any way. Now let's put this cover plate over here, and then we'll put the handles on, and I'll show you what I mean by these handles. If this happens to be a right-handed door, and I know that the handle's curved up on this lock, and you'd want the outside handle to be exactly the same. So if this was a left-handed door, all you have to do is just reverse these handles, because there's no keyhole in the handle, and the handle just goes like this, and it just pops right on there, and you can check it. What I do is I like to just take it and make sure that the handle works just like butter. If it goes and comes up and stops about right there, I would loosen these screws and those two right there. I would center it up again and make sure that my pressure when I'm tightening this lock is the same here on this side as it is on this one. That way you're pretty much assured that you're not putting the latch in any type of a, see, I can't hardly turn it anymore, so I know for a fact that's absolutely perfect. And then we take our other handle on the outside and just pop it on the lock. Of course, it's not going to work. Now let's go on, and we're going to talk about changing the combination on this Schlage combination lever lock. Okay, so now I want to talk to you a little bit about the programming of this. You know, I'm not one of these kind of guys that's going to give you 32 hours of video and spend 22 hours talking about the changing of this code. All of your directions are right here to be able to change the various different functions of this code. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to actually change, I'm going to enter a code in here, and then I'm going to show you how to remove it. Now this lock will hold up to 19 different combinations, and it comes pre-programmed with 2. So you have 2 that are on a little yellow tag that's on this piece of paper. Of course, this is a customer's lock, so I really don't want you to see this, but it's it has a programming code here on a little yellow sticker. Now let's say that you get up to this door and you have this because you've put these in before, and you have one of these, but you don't know what the programming code is, and it's a customer that needs it changed. On the inside of this lock there's a yellow sticker, and on that sticker is that 6-digit programming code. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to add a new combination. First thing we do is we enter the programming code. Now I don't want you to see this, so I'm going to stand in your way, which I'm sorry. And it says that it's going to beep, it's going to flash, and it's going to turn red or orange, whichever you choose to call. Now it says to press this one time. And then you press number 1 to add a code. Now the code I'm going to add is 4145. 4145. It's going to beep 3 times, and then do it again. 4145. And it will turn green. That lets me know that this lock now has that code stored in here. So we go 4145, and it removes the latch, and you can actually open the door. Now to remove this code, you do exactly the same thing. You enter the private code, and it's called the programming code, which is, whoops, I made a mistake. Sorry guys, hang on just a second. All right. Now to remove it, you do exactly the same thing. You press this. Now all I'm doing is just following these instructions. Now I press 2 instead of 1, which is the removal, and I enter the code twice. What was it? 4145? 145. Beeps twice. 4145. And now that code, if I entered it now, it's going to turn red. 4145. Which lets you know that you've entered the wrong code. Now, it will always lock you out for a few seconds if you happen to enter the wrong code so many times, but it will store up to 19 codes. It's an excellent lock. Good money made on this lock right here, and we'll see you on the next lock.